So now you understand some of the basic concepts, or hopefully by now you've got a basic understanding of the difference, for example, between inductive and deductive reasoning, and what a theory is, the different concepts in a theory, how to develop a research question, how a hypothesis comes from a research question, and how a hypothesis connects to a theory. So then if we're going to actually study things, then we have to actually be able to look at things called variables, and we have to see basically what are the things we're going to be changing or manipulating in a research study. So variables are generally a numerical representation of a concept. So it's easy to say, I want to study whether this program helps reduce substance abuse, but exactly how do you know? You have to get incredibly precise and specific, which means you have to define exactly what that is. What am I actually going to look at? And how do I know if it works? If something's got to change, so what type of change am I going to measure? So you have the independent variable, which is usually in social work the program, the intervention, what you're introducing to the mix. And then the dependent variable is usually a change you want to see. Are you so this might be counseling, this might be substance abuse, this might be a program to teach budgeting skills. This might be a reduction in domestic violence. So there's different things you could look at. And then, of course, at all times, you want to make sure that what you're doing is actually what creates that change. So a lot of the times you might say, hey, I've got a program, and some people came into the program and they stayed for 6 months and they had so much improvement and then they left. But what if your program had nothing to do with it? What if the fact that they were just got away from their issues for 6 months and were able to talk to somebody and develop friendships? What if that was what made the change and your counseling or your program really were completely pointless? So think about those kinds of things. When you're testing, you want to make sure that you can kind of rule out these other things to make sure that, yes, this is what caused it, not these other things that happen to coincide. So here's an example, for example, of independent variable and some of the things that might intervene to kind of help explain how some of those things contribute. So you have poverty, but really what you have is a lack of access to health care that then can lead to shorter lifespan, basically. So you've got some things that kind of work in the mix, which means that you really have to, again, sit down and think about your variable and really break it down. This just gives you a nice chart that you can use if you want to kind of take it back to your basic science class, just as a reminder. So just again, let's go back to the hypothesis we're working with and look at then the independent variable, the dependent variable, and again, you've got certain attributes, certain results that your variables can have. So variables work together in specific ways, right? And so you want to, if your program helps somebody, you want to see that there was an improvement in something, or maybe there's a bad thing you want to change. You want to see that bad thing like substance abuse go down. So you're going to be looking at those types of relationships between the program and what you're going to look at between your independent variable, your intervention, whatever that is. So you have a positive relationship. Positive doesn't mean good. It doesn't mean it's helpful. It just means it goes up. That means that as you get, for example, more counseling, maybe that leads to even more and more difference in self-esteem. A negative relationship doesn't mean, again, that it's bad. Maybe you're trying to decrease substance abuse. So maybe more counseling means less substance abuse. That's a good thing in that situation. So negative just means that as one goes up, the other goes down. No relationship means it really didn't make an impact regardless of what you did. It didn't matter where it was. It kind of stayed the same. And so this basically shows no relationship. And then sometimes you have weird, kind of curves. And so you could say, for example, this is me working at night. The more and more work that I put into stuff, the less and less and less productive I get as it gets later and later in the day. But right around midnight, I seem to get a burst of energy, and boom, my productivity kicks up as even more time passes. And so vice versa, you might catch yourself that there's a point in which you study, and you're studying, and you're learning. So here the independent variable is how much you study, the dependent variable is how much you learn. And there comes a point in which it doesn't matter how late you stay up, you're going to be learning less and less.